Hello and welcome to today's ASI Donman webcast. Our topic today is Excel tips and tricks, or TRIPS, as we've got on the screen. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Marla Nelson and I'm a marketing specialist here at ASI. Now, our webcast today will run for under 1 hour, so we'll be finishing at or before 3 o'clock Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Before we get started, I'll run through our usual housekeeping matters and just ensure everybody's up to speed with using the GoToWebinar system. So in the middle of the screen, you'll see the first slide of today's presentation, and then on the right, there's a control panel. Now you can minimize that control panel down to a toolbar by clicking on the orange Grab tab arrow, and this will allow you to view the presentation in full screen. You can then click on that arrow to bring back the control panel should you wish. Now, everyone has been muted upon entry today to allow for clear audio, and we won't be opening up the lines, but we do welcome your questions and comments, so I'll explain how you can interact with us. So you can post your question or comment at any time by using the question pane in the control panel. Just type your question or comment in the box provided and then click on the send button. We'll address these questions and share any comments at the end of the main presentation. And of course, if you're having any technical difficulties with GoToWebinar, you can also use that question pane to talk to me directly, and I'll do my best to assist you. All right, that's housekeeping out of the way. Let's get started. It's now my pleasure to introduce our presenters today. On the line is Gary Lincoln and Murray Neal. Gary and Murray are both senior tech support analysts here at ASI, and they're going to take you through today's topic. So to get started, I'll hand over to Gary. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us. So what today's subject is not so much to do with Donman itself, but to do with something that just about everyone seems to utilize, which is using Excel to put data into. So either we're importing it from a CSV file or a text file or something like that, but there are a few trips, as sort of saying on the screen here, of things that can happen and Excel doing, because Excel by default is a number machine. So it treats some of the fields not the way we want them to when we want them to be pure text. So what we're going to look at is, if I put data into Excel, what things to look out for, things that will muck up your data, and things that we can do about that. Some of the fields we can't fix after we've imported it. Excel's already done its little magic on it and mucked up the field for you, but some of them we can as we go through. So when you're in Excel and you open a TXT file, so a tab delimited file, you'll get the text import wizard show. Unlike a CSV file, that when you open, for most computers, CSV is the default program as Excel. So Excel just opens it natively, so you don't have the same options as you're importing the data to stop and change the formatting for certain fields. So when we start the text import wizard in Excel, you get this sort of screen where it's saying, yes, I can see that there's data, it's delimited. As you go through, then you click on next, and then we get the option to say whether it's tab, comma, space, different ways that data is split up. And when we do that, you'll see down the bottom here, you get the view where it's showing you what the data is going to look like. So basically it's understanding the structure of that as we go through. The two ways that you can create the data by default from Donman are called separate fields or formatted fields. So in this case, I've got separate fields, and you can see I've got title, first name, surname, all of the fields as different fields. The other way I can do it is formatted. So you can see here, address 1 has basically got the name in, address 2 may have the street address, and address 3 may be suburb, state, postcode all in one. Unlike the previous one where you can see I've got street 1, street 2, from there I'd have suburb, state, postcode, etc. So they're the primary differences. If you're going to use the data for anything other than just a mailing, separate fields is probably the much better way to go, because you've then got an option to sort any of the columns by any of the bits of data. Whereas when it's in this format here, I can sort address 3, but it's not going to help me all of the time, because it's pretty much going to sort by the suburb name as we go through. When you get to the third step of the text import wizard, This is where we can choose fields like here. I've highlighted the barcode one to say that that's a text-only field. If I don't do that, Excel will certainly muck this field up because it's larger than the 15 character or digit number that Excel by default will handle. And when you open that in Excel, it will go to scientific notation, and there's no way to really recover from that bar going back to the original text file and starting the process again. Okay, so that's sort of just to give you an idea, and this is what you'll see. So if we hadn't have gone, if on this screen here, if I hadn't have said that this is a text-only field, when I get to here, Excel's done this, and even if I change that from there, only the first 15 digits of that number will display correctly. The rest of the field will all show us zeros. Okay, so that can happen for a number of fields that are longer than the 15 digits. There'll be things like credit card numbers that we shouldn't do too much with in really nowadays in Excel, but certainly barcode is one of the big ones if we're doing mailings and things like that. If I say it's a text-only field, you'll see the little indicator in the top left of the field, but the field is basically in its native format, so it's as it was when it was in the text file. So Excel's basically saying, now I've got that and I'll treat it as text. Okay, so you can do that for things like phone numbers, postcodes, all sorts of different fields. Okay, so what we'll do is go into Excel and have a look at the process itself. Okay, so if I go File, Browse. Okay, so if I go in and have a look at my drive here. Okay, so at the moment I've just got this file here as a Excel file, just to show you what will happen if I just open the file without any formatting at all. So if I go into that one, as you can see, I don't get the text import wizard. I don't have any options to do anything like that. But where I've got my fields here, so I've got my phone numbers, etc., my mobile phone numbers. So you can see the leading zero has separated. And that's a reason in the data itself, when you're storing the data, if you have your phone numbers with spaces in, so you can have the 03, 02, whatever, 44, and the same sort of thing for mobile numbers. If I have the 0407 and then the rest of it broken up, I don't have that problem. Okay, card numbers, again, longer than 15 digits, so it's gone into the same sort of format. As we go across, we'll see Excel, if I have these two dates together, like expiry dates for a card or something like that, Excel will just do what it does. So it's changed that to be January-20, which might not be the final format that I really want that to be in. So to prevent some of that from happening, if we go back here and do our open, okay, in this case, I need to change it down here to say I'm looking for text files. Okay, so now we're coming up with the text import wizard like I showed you earlier. Okay, so next. Okay, whether my data is tab or comma delimited. If you've got a comma delimited file that you want to put into Excel, and there is a chance that you've got fields, like these that are going to get mucked up, what you can do is rename the file to .txt, even though the structure is a comma delimited file, and that will still take you through the steps of the text import wizard, except here I'd be saying comma instead of tab. Okay, so most of the data that comes out of Donman by default is tab delimited pretty much for this sort of purpose. It's a much cleaner format, especially where you've got embedded commas and things in addresses and other fields that might be part of your data. So if I do next, okay, so now I'm getting to the screen where you can see my phone numbers have got the 0 in front, etc. The full card numbers are there, the expiry month, the date, the year is basically like we expect it to be with the 01/2020 and the full barcode. So what I need to do for those fields is, as I'm importing, is go through and say, I want to treat that as a text-only field so that Excel doesn't do what it's sort of natively trying to do. Text, I forget my last one. So in this case, it's not a data file as you'd normally have with names and addresses and stuff like that. It's really to highlight the fields that you do need to be concerned about as part of your data. So once I've done those fields, I can then do finish. Okay. So now I'm getting my data in here. And as you can see, they've all got the little indicator up the top left-hand corner of the cell to say Excel's doing something with that. Okay, but you can see the structure hasn't changed, unlike the previous sheet where these were pretty much all corrupted and they were sort of too late for the game. When you get the data into Excel, you could then say, look, what I want to do is do some sort of formatting on these fields so that they look a bit nicer. Okay. If you've got a field that's already got spaces in it, Excel by default will treat the field as text because you can't have text like a space in a number. Otherwise, it'll just say that, no, that can't be a number, it has to be text. So you can have decimal points and things, but you just can't have a space there. So if we wanted to format these, okay, so mobile numbers are probably the easiest field to format because we don't have to worry about, STD prefixes. So whether I've got, 02, 03, 07, 08, whatever my prefix may be for the different states and territories, I don't need to worry about that so much. But if we look at the phone work first, so if I highlight the column, right click, you can then go down to Format Fields and Custom. Okay. So this is basically creating a layout that I want the field to look like. So if I said I want it to have the 0 and then the first digit, then a space, 4 digits, space, and 4 digits again. Okay, sorry. No, because I've imported that, I'll have to go back one step. Because I've imported that, I've tripped myself up, and this is how easy this happens. Because I've imported it as text already, I can't do those formatting. Because again, Excel's saying, well, you can't format text. It just doesn't make sense to be able to do that. So if I were cancel that one. Okay, so here I've got basically the same file, but you can see I've lost my trailing zeros and things like that. Okay, my card number is going to be a little bit harder to recover in that stage, and we'll get to that field in a minute. So again, if I highlight my field, go to Format, Custom. Okay, if you've already done a custom format, you'll find it down the bottom here. So when we do this one now, so 0 again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'm now getting the field to look the way that I want to. So this is handy if you've got data that you want to maybe tidy up, and you can put it into Excel, put all your STD codes on, get rid of brackets and dashes and things that might be in your phone number field, format them all nicely, and then we could save that back as a text file and use that to import into Donman. Okay. With things like mobile numbers, similar sort of format. So if I go to Format, again, go down to Custom. So in this case, that'll be the 0 and the 3 hashes for the 3 numbers, space 3, space 3. I can count. Okay, so once I've done that, okay, so I can now see that my majority of these are formatted properly, but where I have numbers where people put the 61 in front or plus 61 or something like that, what we can do is, again, highlight the column, do Control F for find it and replace. So if it's got plus 61, then I'd say search for plus 61 and remove it. In this case, if I just search for the 61, this may muck me up a little bit here, and I'm going to replace it with nothing or replace it with 0. Okay. So if I just do replace, of course it can't. Okay. So what will happen is if I find that, because I've got 6 ones in the middle of the field and things like that. So you can see when I click in the field, it's now showing me how Excel's actually seeing it with the formatting turned off. If I delete that 6 1 and enter, I've now got my number I've got one number short in this case, but I've got my number where it's trying to fit into the format. So if that real number was like that, so I'm now getting the format correct. What it also means is that when I've got a whole lot of numbers, I don't want to sit and look at every number and try and work out whether it's got good data in it or bad. I can pretty much scroll down the spreadsheet, and just based on the spacing of the data, you can see if there's something that doesn't have enough digits. So if we were to go back and we take that one digit off, so you can see straight away if you're scrolling up that there's something wrong with that number. So it's a very easy way to sort of try and get the data tidy. Some numbers you won't be able to sort out because it's, somebody's put an overseas number in or something like that, or it may be a very old number that was pre the 10-digit numbers that we have now for everything. But from there, fairly easy to sort of fix that stuff in Excel by using the format. Okay, then we get on to more tricky ones. So with the card number, you can see it's already into this notation here. Bit of a pain in the to deal with because I can't use that for anything. As you can see, at this point, they all look exactly the same. If I right click on this column and do format cells, I can choose number, say 0 decimal points, and do OK. But what you'll notice is because it's a 16-digit number, the last digit, Excel says, I don't know what to do with that. I can't, transpose it. So it's basically made them all 0. So in this case, I've got a whole lot of dummy numbers, but when you've got real numbers, that last digit will become a 0. And again, the numbers are fairly much not usable at that point. So for things like card numbers, and the same thing we'll see when we go up to barcodes, we need to make sure when we import it that we do say that it's got the text formatting so that things don't muck up. The same sort of thing here for my expiry. That's already happened, and it's very hard for me to recover and make it into the format it was before, which will be the month and the year with a slash in between, because Excel's already done that sort of formatting as we go. So if we go back and have a look at the file with a barcode, close this one. Don't need to save it. Okay. If I choose the right file, sorry. I'll get it right anytime now. Okay. So now I do have one in here that's purely just got barcodes because it's a pretty unique sort of beast. Okay, so text files. Okay, so again, in this case, I can see all I've got is two columns, donor number and barcode, but in this case, it's not a tab delimited field or file, it's comma delimited. So you can see the comma between the two columns. So if I do next, and by default, you can see it's on tab, but Excel hasn't understood the structure of the data until I take that one out and say it's comma, and you can see now the line here is indicating that Excel knows that that's where the data is delimited. So basically where one field ends and the next one starts. So if I were to go through, so we can see here I've got 3s on the end of my barcodes and a whole lot of other digits. So if I go, yes, I'm excited, I'm getting it into Excel, and I just get to there. So pretty much like the credit card numbers, you can see it's gone into a bit of a strange format that isn't very helpful. If we try and recover from that the same sort of way, and say, no, that was a number, I don't want any digits. So you can see pretty much half of the number has now transposed to be just zeros. So Excel saying, well, it can't recover from that. So it sort of highlights the point that when you import that, we do really need to make sure that we choose those options to say, look, this is a field that I want to maintain as a text field. So if we go next, again, we've got our comma. Next, and at this point here, say that that's text. Okay, and you can see my field is now in the structure and with the data that it had originally. It's not being corrupted by anything as we go through. So it's really something to be wary of, that when you get data, especially if it's a CSV, and we'll have a look at that now. I don't have the option to do that text change at all. It basically just opens up because Excel is the default. And I found myself of late changing the default for CSV files in Windows 10 seems to be near on impossible of what we can do. It doesn't matter what I've done, Excel keeps going back to being the default. I've tried to make it a text, like a text editor, so you can actually see the data and things like that, but it just doesn't sort of go through. Okay, so there are other files that when you run reports in Donman, like the campaign breakdown report and a lot of those other reports will create a tab delimited text file that you can also open and import into Excel. Okay, so on that, you'll have it under your DM work directory, you'll have a folder called report_text. And when you go in there, you'll see a whole lot of text files. And these are the results of all of the reports as we go through. So if we were to open one of these up, so we'll do our campaign breakdown. Okay, so again, it's recognizing it as a text file, and I get that option to go through and say, yes, it's delimited and all those options. Okay, so there's not too many things when we get to this stage that are going to muck me up, because I don't have barcodes and credit card numbers, and I don't have too many long fields like that. So for the majority of things, you can sort of go through and say, yes, that's fine, because I don't have an option to say, look, I want my amount here to be currency at this point. It's really general sort of data structure. So it's a general field, which is just a straight Excel field. It's text. You can have dates where you can choose the format, or if you've got a field that might be in the file and you said, look, I really don't want to import it, you can just highlight those columns. So look, I don't need to import that. And then finish, and you'll end up with just the data that you're looking for. Okay, so from the set report, exactly the same principle. It's just opening a text file, whether it be something from Donman or something that somebody else has sent you all the way through. You can sort of still, use those and come through. Going back to what I was talking about before with the comma delimited files, if I've got a CSV file, which I should have, okay, so you can see here I've got this file here called barcode CSV file, and it's CSV. And you can see it's got the Excel icon. So as I was saying before, it doesn't matter what I've done, I haven't been able to change that. So when I double click on that, okay, straight away, I don't have the option to change that. It's basically corrupted my barcodes straight away. However, if we just close all these Excel windows, if I were to rename the file, and if perchance on your computer you can't see the file extension, it's no good trying to rename it because it won't change anything. You'd have to go through the control panel, and under, depending which version of Windows, it'll be under folder options, where you can change the view, and there's a checkbox. I'll show you on mine. Okay, so under Windows 10, it's File Explorer options. If you go to View, there's a checkbox down here that says Hide Extensions for Known File Types. So by default, that's on. So that's Windows trying to help us by hiding stuff from us. But if you take that off, you'll then be able to see the actual file extensions like I can here, which means that if I want to, even though the file is still a CSV file, I can then rename it to be text. Okay, it'll complain. Okay, and you can see as soon as I've changed it to text, it's changed the icon to say it's no longer an Excel file. But if I now want to open that in Excel, I can do the same sort of thing. except I can now choose the option to use the text import wizard, because it will still see it as a text file. If we can get Excel to start again, we'll have a look at that. Okay, so now if I do a file, browse, go back into my folder. Okay, again, change it to text file. So there's my file that I've renamed. Okay, so you can see the structure is still CSV as we get to here. So I do have to say that it's a comma delimited file. Take the tab out. But now I've got the option that I didn't have previously to say that that is a text-only field, so that Excel will leave alone. Okay. So there's some of the things that will sort of go through as you sort of have different bits of data. If you've got a file that's got text fields in that for one reason or another you wanted to join together, then in Excel it has a feature called Concatenate, which means I can join different fields. So I'll just do this one quickly. Okay, so if I've got fields here and I said, look, I really don't need to have campaign. I'm really looking for dates and things like that. Okay, so if I said, for instance, I wanted to join the donor number and the company, again, the campaign, so basically the name of the person and the donor number into one field. So what I can do is go into a new field and say equals, and if you type con, you'll see it come up here as the option. So concatenate. So then you can see it's got text 1, comma, text 2, and all the way through. So if I said text 1 is going to be the donor number, but then I want a space. So we can then type the comma, just like the example below, showing you that's how I need to split it. I can put a quote, space quote, comma, and then choose the next field. Okay, so I've now joined those two fields together. And if we wanted to do the whole sheet, it's really just a matter of copy and paste that all the way down. So you can do that for any field at all. So if you had, two fields, or if you had exported the data as separate fields, so we had Mrs. Harriet Harrisburg, 3 separate fields, and I then wanted to join them together, I can still do the same thing by doing concatenate. So it's a nice handy little thing to know when we're playing with data. So as we can go through, we can sort of do things like that. So that's sort of the end of what I'm going to show you today, and hopefully you found that a little bit helpful and alerted you to some of the things that will go wrong in Excel. And I'll hand over to Murray now, who will show you a few more things you can also do with your data in Excel.
Thanks, Gary. I'm going to start off by having a look at one of the things that people often ask us for. If they've got a selection file of donors and they want some information about these donors and perhaps how much they've given over a number of different years as a breakdown year by year, one of the ways of producing a report like that is to use Excel. When we create a selection or a merged data file from a selection file, there is an option to create or add a couple of fields called period total and period count. So if I've got a selection file already, and we won't cover that today, I can go into create mail merge data file, and I've got a selection file that I've called recent. So these are people that have given in the last 2 or 3 years, and pressing enter, you can see there's 6 in my selection file. This next option here, it says, do you want to output an amount for each donor based on total within a period of time? If I say yes here, I get this pop-up screen where I can nominate, say, a date range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the year 2016 here. So that's just 01/01/16 through to 31/12/16. So I won't worry about particular campaigns, filtering them or anything like that, but you could if you wanted to. The rest of it I'm just going to take by default, but I'm going to rename it from appeal, I'm going to call this recent 16 because this is going to have the information for the year 2016 for those people. Now, I'll overwrite the file that's already there, and I won't worry about adding or removing fields. I'll just accept whatever's in there, and it's now gone and created a file called recent16.txt. I could now then repeat that for recent 17 and recent 18, but I've already done that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go into Excel and open up those 3 files. Now, the information that we get from those 3 files will be in the same order as our selection file. So let me go in and open those. Oops, browse. And where am I? Not the right place. And like Gary did, we need to change this to text files so I can see them. And here's the one that I created today, and these 2 I created a couple of days ago. So I'm actually just going to highlight all 3 of those and open them. And I get the text import wizard. I'm going to ignore everything Gary's taught us, and I'm going to say, look, I don't care about any information like phone numbers or anything like that because I'm not interested in that. So I'm just going to go finish on each of these. So there's my first one, here's my second one, and here's my third one. So what you're looking at in each case, you would have noticed was exactly the same because the information that's different between them is right at the far right-hand side, this periodic total and periodic count. So I'm going to go, first of all, to my recent 16, and I'll get rid of some stuff. So maybe I'll just leave their first name and surname, and I'll basically delete pretty much all the columns. I probably should keep the donor number, so I'll get rid of that, everything but that, and then I'll get rid of all of this stuff up until this period total and period count. And I don't want this end of list one, there's nothing in that. So this is for 2016, so I'll just go 2016, oops, missed the O, 2016 count, and I'll make this one 2016 total. So now if I go to 2017, which is this one here, all I need to do is grab these last 2 columns here. So I'll rename them first, 2017 count and 2017 total. And all I'm going to do is copy these 2. So copy those, and I'll go back to my 2016, this one here, and I'll just paste them in here. Okay, so I've now got my 2017 count and total, and then I can do the same thing for 2018. So for each of these donors, you can see, well, none of them gave anything in 2016. You can see what they've given in 2017. And if I were to repeat the same thing for 2018, I would have all of that information there. So when you create those text files from Donman, you can choose any periods that you like. And because they're all based on the same selection file, you can just do that copy and paste for those 2 columns and know that each of those will correspond to the correct donor. All right, so that's just a nice, easy way of actually producing the data from a selection file. I'm going to close those down so we don't get confused. Don't need to save any of these. Okay. So I'm going to now run a different report in Excel, something that I've set up in VisRep, and this is going to extract every donation since the beginning of 2016. So I've already got that as a format that I've saved, so I'm going to open that up, and it's this one called Recent Donations. So you can see basically the only criteria, first of all, I'm reporting on the donation file. So every single donation will be looked at, but I'm only going to pick the ones where the actual donation date is from the 1st of the 1st, 2016 onwards. So if I have a look down here, you can see this is the sort of information I'm outputting. So I'm going to take the donor number, the amount, campaign code, date, ledger code, pay method, and the donation type. So if I now actually run that, so I'm going to say save report data as Excel, and because I've got the show in Excel, that will automatically start Excel or show or leave it in Excel, and it's actually given the same name as my report format, recent donations, but this is going to be an Excel file. So I'll just override that. Okay, so now flashing down here is my Excel file. I'll just maximize that and expand the dates. So now I've got every single donation for the last pretty much 3 years. And this is where Excel really does well. And I guess the word Excel is what it does when it comes to data analysis. So sometimes we want to look at individual donations, but not all of them, only particular ones. And that's where filtering can be very helpful. If we go to the Data tab and click on the filter, you can see these little drop-down buttons here next to each of the headings on my data. For instance, let's suppose I was only interested in maybe cash and checks. I can click on the drop-down box there. You can see all the possible things that I've got in my data. If I say unselect all and say, look, I only want cash and checks, now that's the only type of donation it's going to show me. I can do the same sort of thing and say, look, for campaign, I only am interested in, say, bequests and general donations and grants. And when I do that, now I only see campaigns that are part of what I selected, where the pay method is either a cash or a check. And you can do that to your heart's content, pick as many or as little of those things as you want, so that you're actually filtering. So you're not seeing all of the data, you are just seeing the data that meets the criteria that you've specified in your filter. You can change those and add things back in. So if I wanted to also include, say, auction items, I can do that. And somewhere in my list, there would be one or more donation for that particular campaign. To go back to seeing them all, I can simply undo the filter, and I've now got everything back the way it was. One of the other things that you often like to do is to sort the data so that perhaps we can get to see all of the donations from each individual donor, one all together rather than spread out. At the moment, you can see this is done in donation date order, and that's because of the way that I chose to output it in my VisRep report. I can go up to sort, and because it recognizes that I've got headers, when I choose the columns to sort by, I can do that by actual sort column name. So a simple one would simply be to do it by donor number. And now you can see all the ones for donor number 1, there seems to be about 5 of those. They're all there together. Now, you can do multi-level sorting where within donor number, you can sort based on maybe donation date. So we can see here, well, it is actually still in donation date order, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort it again. My first level is still going to be donor number, so all my donor number 1s are going to be together, all my 2s are together, but I can click on add level, and if I sort now by the amount, at the moment this is going to go from smallest to largest. But if I change that from largest to smallest and go OK, you can see for donor number 1, their highest donation is the first one, then going all the way down to the smallest. Same thing for number 2, 400 down to 30. Now, that may be nice on here, but one of the things that people have often asked us, and which we find a little hard to do just purely in Donman, people will say, look, within the last 5 years or 3 years in this case, I want to know what the highest donation is from each donor. So at the moment, their first one for each donor is their highest, and I've got this option, I can't see it anymore. I'm looking for remove duplicates, but because I guess, that's a bit strange, because I've got a smaller screen, I don't seem to be able to see that there, unless I'm missing it. Oh, okay. Well, if my screen was larger, then what I'd be able to do, there's an option for remove duplicates, and I'm sorry that I can't actually show you that because I don't know where that's actually got to. But when you actually click on that, you can tell it what is defined as a duplicate. And if we told it that donor number was the only thing that represented a duplicate, then what it would do is it would remove any records where there was more than one for the same donor number, and it would always leave the first one, which in this case is going to be the highest. So what it would have done is it would have left donor number 1, 600, and the details for that donation. The next line would then be donor number 2, 400 grants, etc., etc. So you would end up with just one on each line, one from each donor. So a very useful thing. In fact, maybe one of these things is remove duplicates. There we go. That's what I was looking for. It's just left it down. So this is where I've got a list of all those columns. I'll just say unselect all. I'll say donor number. So anything where there's another record with the same donor number as the one before it, it'll say, okay, that's a duplicate. I'm going to remove it. So when I go OK, that's what I was explaining before. So for each donor, you can see what their highest donation was within that period of time. And if when we had exported the data, we had perhaps eliminated certain types of campaigns, maybe things where they were buying products or buying a ticket, if we'd removed those at that stage, or if we'd perhaps sorted by campaign and deleted those before we did the sorting, then again we would see the highest donation with certain limitations on the actual campaigns. Okay, I'm going to undo that. So we're now back to the way we were. In fact, if I undo that sort, we're now back to the way that we got it originally. So what we're going to have a look at now is something called a pivot table. Now, there is actually a webinar on this from about 3 or 4 years ago that goes into a lot more detail, but today I'm just going to show you the sort of things that can be done very easily with it. So if you've got data like this, I'll just highlight all of the columns, or I can simply click in here. And if I go to the Insert tab and select Pivot Table, it's already got the highlighted columns. I'm going to create a new worksheet, so that's normal. I'm just going to go OK. So what I end up with is basically a blank pivot table with the options over here. So primarily I'm concerned with the dollar amounts. So what I can do is I can drag amounts down to this sigma values here. So you can see it's come up with the sum of the amount, and already it's giving me the total of all of my donations within that period. I can actually go into here and select field settings, and there's a number format. So I'm just going to change that number format and make that currency, just so that we know that it's actually dollars. Now let's suppose we want to split that by campaign. I can grab campaign and put that into rows, and now automatically it's given me every row, and I didn't have to resort the data in any way. And then at the bottom, I've got my total. Or let's say I didn't want to do it by campaign, I wanted to do it by pay method. So there's a very simple pay method breakdown for that period. Let's say I'll do it by donation type. And so there we have it. Now, at the moment, this is giving us the sum across all 3 years, but maybe we want to have a breakdown on a year-by-year basis. So I can take the donation date and put that into columns, and now you can see it's now split that by year. There's a little plus symbol next to it. I can click on that, and at the moment, it's breaking it down by quarter, and then I can click on the quarter and get month by month. But most people don't tend to want quarter, so I can actually drag this quarter from here, drag it back up to there, and now when I open up any of these, it just shows me the particular months for which there were donations. So quite a nice little feature there, just to give a very basic overview. And this is the sort of analysis that Excel is very good at. Now, at the moment, this is giving us a sum, but we might want to know the number of donations. So at the moment, I've got sum there. I could change this by going to field settings and changing from sum to count. And now, oh, it's giving me as dollars, so I'd have to change that. So let me put it back to the sum, and I'll put in another value. So I'll just drag amount down again into here, but this one I will change to count. But you've also got things like average, max, minimum, etc. So now, for each of these years, and unfortunately because I'm on a fairly low bandwidth, low resolution screen, you can see I've now got both the sum and the count for each of those, and I can actually in fact go into, say, one of these, and instead of just saying sum of amount, I'll just change that to say sum, so it doesn't take up as much room, and I'll do the same thing for the count. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Put that back. So I'll make it a count, but I'll just name that as count and go OK. So there we have, on a year-by-year basis, the sum and the count. Sum and count with the overall total and count at the end. Now, suppose we want a breakdown of this type by maybe the ledger code. I can then drag the ledger code down, or chart account code, down into rows. And so I'll forget about this. This is one where the donation type was blank. But if we look at donation type of age, then here you've got the two particular ledger codes that we use for donations for the age donation type. And then DMail here, we've got 3 ledger codes for email. We've got 3 as well. So that's giving us a breakdown of the donation type by chart of account code. If I want it the other way around, I can drag that back up here and drag that down underneath it, and now I've got it the opposite way around. So for ledger code 4-1010, here are all the particular different pay method, the donation types for that, and then for ledger code 4-1011, I've got all the donation types there as well. Now, there are some features up under design where you can put it into nice, colorful reports and do some nice little things there if you want to make it nice and pretty, things like this. And anytime you see a value in one of these cells, like for that $590 for event under 4-1010, if you want to actually see the 12 donations that they represent, all you have to do is double click it, and it's now brought up a new sheet, and it actually shows you the information that's relevant to that. I could go back and do the same thing for that 52,000, and it brings up all of that information as well. Okay, and of course the original data is still in my original sheet. I haven't changed that at all. And if I change any information here, I can go back to my pivot table, and I can just tell it to refresh that for me. Now, the last thing I'll want to mention briefly is a subtotal report. I don't find this anywhere near as useful as a pivot table, because as you've seen from the pivot table, you can pretty much do anything that you like. With the subtotal reports, you basically need to sort the data in the order that you want it grouped. So for instance, if I go back into the data tab, I'll sort it by, say, donor number. And then I can go into, now this is going to be interesting, which of these is going to be the one I want? Maybe not on this part. No, so I'm normally used to getting this elsewhere, perhaps. Here we go, subtotal under outline. So I'm going to use the function I want to sum, and I want to add up the amount. And so if I go OK to that, it churns away. It's a lot slower than the pivot table, considering it's doing a lot less. And so what I can do is I can go to level 2, and now for each donor, I've got the amount. If I go to level 1, then right at the top, I think, or probably actually at the bottom, somewhere there would be an overall total. But that's the sort of thing that you can do. And of course, if you go back to level 3, it shows you all of the information. You can undo some of these, or if I go to number 2 and say, oh, what are these donations for 99? I can click on the plus and I can see those as well. Now, time's nearly up. If there was more time, I might have also looked at a VLOOKUP. Perhaps you can check your help and see what VLOOKUP does, but it is a very useful function in certain information. So I'm going to hand back now to Marla for any questions that may have arisen.
Thank you, Murray. Yeah, just as we mentioned at the beginning of the session, if you do have any questions, now is the time to ask them. If you just open the control panel to the right of the viewer window and type your question in the question pane, and I can read them out to Gary and Murray. So there's a question from earlier from Ashwini, just wondering about how you import back into Donman. So for instance, the example they've used is invites and RSVPs for an event. How can you denote that back in Donman that they've attended?
Okay, this is probably a little bit outside of what we've done. We have done webinars on importing data as well. So for the detail, I would suggest that you go to that. If you're importing and updating, say, the donor records, maybe you've done what Gary's done and fixed up some of the phone numbers, you can use the general import program that's under the Modify History Archive menu. So let me get out of VisRep. So you can go into Modify History Archive menu, and we have the General Import Program. That will work for donors and for prospect. If you're wanting to actually create records for things like a function record to record where somebody has said they're coming or they've come, you will actually need a special program that we've got, which is very similar to the General Import Program, but it's one that's not on any menu because you can do a lot of damage if you use it incorrectly, but it can be used from the System Utility menu with our help, essentially. What you would need to do is create all the necessary fields into a spreadsheet. So you'd have columns for each of the fields, and then you could import that and create brand new records. There is also a way of updating existing records, but that becomes a little bit more tricky.
All right, thank you, Murray. There doesn't look to be any more questions for the moment, so we might start the wrap up there. So first of all, today's webcast has been recorded and you will receive a copy of it on email in the next couple of hours, so you can review it at your own leisure and as well share it with any of your colleagues that couldn't attend today. As well, we always post a copy of our webcast to our website, so either go to donman.net.au and follow the links from there, or otherwise go straight to our client support portal and you'll find the videos there as well. Now, also, when you disconnect from today's webcast, if you can please take just a few moments to complete our webcast survey that'll pop up on the screen. It's just a few quick questions that will provide us with some feedback on our webcast program, so thank you in advance for that. And just finally, this was our last webcast for 2018. So firstly, thank you for your support and best wishes for the festive season. So we'll be in touch early in the new year with details of our 2019 webcast program. So look out for details shortly. So again, thank you for attending today, and thank you, Gary and Murray, for a very informative webcast. We look forward to speaking with you again in the new year. So goodbye for now.
Bye.
Bye now.
I presume we're done.